Danny's mentioned about my name. When I was at school, you got called by your first name first when they did the register. Your second name first, sorry. So my friends, they called me like Hule, Tony, Sir, I'm here. I got down to me, it was King David. You hear this morning? So every day of my life in school, I had to answer to King David. Did I get some stick in Salford for that one? But as we're talking about leaders and we're talking about prayer, what an amazing role model.
Yeah.
To actually grow up with and be associated by name and found that your name is in the Bible. You know, some people find their first name. I can find my first and my last name in the Bible together. But I was praying about today, you know, the need for us throughout our ministry to pray for and to see develop leaders that come behind us and come around us, and I pray at times surpass us. There's nothing greater than when you pray for a leader and you see them fly and do far more than what you've done. I remember walking with my dad one day. I get the walking from my dad. You can blame him. I remember walking with my dad. My dad was a pastor. And as kids, when we were growing up, we were always known as Bob King's sons, me and my brother. Wherever we went, they're Bob King's sons, they're Pastor King's sons. I don't think anyone ever really remembered our first names. We were just Bob King's son. And then as my ministry started to develop, one day somebody went up to my dad and went, "You're Dave King's dad." And he said, an interesting thing, he said, "That was the most proudest day of my life." Because actually, the one I prayed for, one of my sons, the one I've prayed for, one I've invested in, one I've developed as a leader, is now surpassing. But the reason they're surpassing is because they're building upon the foundation I've laid down. Do you see that? There's a subtle difference there. When we think about prayer, we're not getting people to take over from us, because sometimes we're looking for who can take over from us. And we're looking for a little, what we might say in England, a little mini-me, just to take over from us. What God's really challenged us to pray for is pray for leaders who will build upon what surpass us. Amen. And go even further, not just maintain what we've built or what we've developed. So we're going to look at the first couple of chapters of Samuel for a few minutes this morning. And one of the reasons we're looking at the first couple of chapters of Samuel is because I prayed and asked God what to speak about and where to root this down. And it's amazing in the first couple of chapters of Samuel, there's an amazing story of a man with two wives, which nowadays sounds very strange to us. That wasn't normal in those days. But a man with two wives, and the two wives, well, one wife in particular was antagonistic to the other wife. And we're going to read starting from verse 3 of chapter 1, verse 3 to verse 8 initially. And it reads like this: "Year after year, this man," that was Elkanah, "went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord the Almighty at Shiloh." Now Shiloh is the place where the tabernacle was and the priests were. Where Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of meat to his wife Phinehas and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept on provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" It seems a horrible situation, doesn't it? Every year when they went to worship, Hannah was, in Salford would say, picked on. Somebody was having a go at her. Happened to be the other wife. Why was she having a go at her? Because she had no children. That was quite a thing in those days. The children were your legacy. The children were what you were leaving. That would carry on the family name after you. They would lead the family after you'd led the family. She was leaving no leadership for the family. Do you know, there's times when we're in ministry when we can't see where this is going. When we're really praying, saying, God, I need some insight, I need some wisdom, I need to see as you see. Here, Hannah is just getting bogged down, she's getting oppressed, she's feeling down. Do you know what's going to happen? I'm going to give a spoiler alert here because I'm going to tell the end of the story now. What is going to happen is this. Not only is she going to get some legacy and some leadership for her family, because she pushes into God at that point in prayer, which we'll come to in a minute, she's going to see literally, physically birthed and spiritually birthed the leadership for a nation. She's at a point where she's looking for leadership for a family and legacy for a family. But what she's going to do, she's going on a journey of prayer where it turns out that she's not just going to end up praying for somebody who can just stay in her house. And by house, I don't just mean a physical thing with four walls. I mean a family house. Yeah. Not just going to stay in her house, but actually she's going to give this child away, prompted by God in prayer. She's going to give this child is going to lead a nation. He's going to lead a nation. And I want us just to think through that for a minute. Because her immediate need was for somebody in her house to take over her role or to help develop and to stand up for her in her place. But what God wanted to birth through her is somebody who would build upon but excel where she'd been. So as we start to think about and look at leadership and future leaders and pray for leadership, let us not just restrict what God can do, but let us take the restrictions off. So we're not praying for somebody just to replace me when I retire. I just need, this is getting too much for me now, I just need somebody to take it on. Do you know what I mean? I travel around the country lots, and sometimes you'll get churches go, we just need a new pastor. What they mean is, this one's ready to retire.
Are you reading my mind?
we just need somebody to slot into that, exactly that being a mini-me of the person we've got. See, God wants to do more. And in this passage, it goes on to read from verse 9 through to verse 20. It says this: Once when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting in his chair by the doorpost of the house of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servants, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. Notice this. She's giving him to the Lord, what, till he's 18 and he can make his own mind up? No, in prayer, she's going to give him to the Lord all the days of his life. And it goes on to say this: and no razor will ever be used on his head. That's a sign of one who's going to be separated unto God and live a holy life. So she's making a vow. She's not just praying for a son to ease her pain. She's moved on from that, and her desire has moved from a son to ease her pain to a son who will serve the Lord, be holy and separated to the Lord. We'll come back to that in a minute because there's significance to that. Goes on to say, as she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving. Her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk, and said to her, how long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. That's a lady who's battling in prayer. There's a lady who's intense, who's pushing in, who's looking for an answer, who's really pushing through in prayer to God. It says, "Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." There's a thing called the prayer of agreement. This is a really interesting part in this story when you're praying for new leaders. Eli was the ultimate leader. He had 2 sons. It was said of his 2 sons in 1 Samuel 2:12, it says this. 1 Samuel 2:12, Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. And then in verse 17 it says this of them: "This sin of the young men," meaning Eli's sons, "was great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt." They were the priests. They were known if you took your sacrifice and they were on duty. They would try and take their allowance, or even more than their allowance, before the sacrifice was properly made. They had no respect for the ways of God. This lady goes in and starts to pray. She's praying for a son to give him back to the Lord, a future leader. That's what she's praying for, a future leader. The one who comes and agrees with her in prayer is the father of the 2 sons who's totally disrespecting the Lord. Yet, he doesn't know what she's prayed for fully. See, sometimes God joins you with others in prayer. Sometimes you fully don't understand how that connection's taking place, but you know something significant has shifted and it's happening. When you're praying, have your eyes and ears open around you for what's going on. Here, he agrees with her, and we see the thing come to pass. See, her desire of her heart was being changed by God. That's the first point, very quickly. Her desire was being changed from just wanting a son for herself to actually a desire was for a future leader of the nation. That's what she was praying for there. So first of all, her desire was developed and changed. Secondly, she had dedication. She had to dedicate this child. She prayed for it. She received the child. The child was born. She weaned the child. Notice she fed the child up to the point where the child went on solid foods. Reminds you a bit what Paul said, doesn't it, about the milk and the meat. She weaned the child through to the point where she was ready to give it and dedicate the child. Sometimes we pray for things, we desire things, they come to us, we've got hold of them, but God says now lay them down and dedicate them to the purpose. When you're praying for new leaders, make sure when they're ready, when they're weaned, you release and dedicate them. Let them fly. Don't try and control them to the point where you're restricting what God wants to do through them. This is what she did here. Just read this in 1 Samuel 1 Samuel 1, 21 to 28. It says this: "When her husband Elkanah went up and all his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, after the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." Notice that I will present him where? Before the Lord. And where will he live? Before the Lord always. She wasn't just looking for a statesman in that sense. She was looking for a man who had a heart after God's own heart. So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until he was weaned him. After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull and an ephah of flour and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked him. So now I give him to the Lord for his whole life, and he will be given over to the Lord, and he worshipped the Lord there. When you've got a desire, you've got to then, when you receive the desire of your heart for that leader, you've got to then dedicate that leader when he's weak. And you've got to step back and let that leader worship God. You know, the first lesson Samuel learned was to what? Was to listen to God. Remember the story of Eli? He had to learn to listen to the voice of God. When you watch the life of Samuel, he was one who listened. He was the one who anointed King Saul when King Saul failed. He was the one who listened again. He went to Bethlehem. He went through all the brothers until he got to King David. I just got that little one in. Until he got to David, he would be king. Yeah. And you know, just take some things from this story of prayer. What prayer releases when you're praying? You're looking to say, God, teach me how to pray. What do I need to pray for? What am I praying into for these emerging leaders? But you've got to learn the desire. You've got to learn to dedicate. Then you've got to learn to be devoted and show devotion. You know, it's really hard when people take over what you've built. For you not to want your 2 penn'orth, as we would say. In other words, not to try and keep on correcting them, or not to react when they do something you may not have done. You know, one of the hardest lessons is that when I hand over something to somebody else, God will tell them what to do. He won't tell me what they should be doing. If you think about that for a minute, why? They're now in charge of it. He's going to lead them and he's going to guide them. And it's very difficult to be one who's showing devotion and looking to bless the new leader rather than one who's critiquing the new leader. Does that sort of make some sense? Here she's coming every year to the temple and singing a song. Now, when I was younger, when me and my brother came home from school, the first thing my mum always said to us was, have you behaved yourself today? She knew I was quite a lively, hyperactive kid. But then she'd encourage us. But here, when we read this story, what's really interesting, in the devotion to Samuel, verses 18 to 21 of chapter 2, it says this: But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. Each year his mother made him a little robe and took it to him. When she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice, Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife, saying, May the Lord give you children by this woman to take the place of the one she prayed for and gave to the Lord. Then they would go home, and the Lord was gracious to Hannah. She gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Every year she took him a gift. Every year she went to bless him, to give him what he needed, the robe he needed for the next year of his growth. Think about that for a minute. But here we're talking about like physical growth. But think of when you hand on leadership, when you step back and let somebody come in, think about how can you bless them that helps them grow spiritually over the next year. Not restrict them, not tell them what to do, but what can you give that helps them grow into and keep on growing into their ever-growing ministry of leadership. See, here we have an amazing lady who first of all had a desire and let God shape the desire. From being quite a personal desire of somebody who was hurting to be one who was going to pray for someone for a nation. First of all, desire, then dedication. For one who would receive what she desired, but then give it back to God and dedicate it to him. But then one of devotion, who wouldn't sit back and complain and think, if only I kept him for a bit longer. No. One who released him but was devoted to him, that kept on bringing what he needed for his next year of growth and development. You know, when I reflect on this story, and I reflect on the story of it goes on to where where Eli tells Samuel to respond to God when God's speaking to him. I'm seeing the birth of an amazing leader of God. And there I can learn some principles for my prayer life, of what is the desire of my heart. What is God's desire? How does he want to shape my desire? How does he want to shape what I dedicate? How am I going to be devoted and honouring of the leadership when people come through? They're just free thoughts. I'm just going to pray with you guys now, and I'm back to down there. Shall we pray? Father God, we just want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you for Hannah. Thank you for the way she just came before you in a place of deep hurt, in a place of feeling rejected, of feeling not wanted, of feeling a lower person in society because she had no children. Father, the way you moved in her and through her, the way she literally birthed leadership of a nation, the way she literally birthed somebody who was speaking to many lives in that nation and still speaks to us now through your word. The way she dedicated and took her hands off what you needed and what you wanted to do to let you move in the life of a young son. And the way then she was devoted to him and brought him what he needed every year to bless him. Father, may we learn from you how to release leadership in our churches, throughout the ministry in our different departments. May we learn what it really means to release people who won't just fill in our shoes, but actually will build upon, develop on, and be led by you, walk in your presence, and be worshippers of you. In the name of Jesus.